Hey everyone, this is Sarah with your December of 2021 astrological overview. Happy end of the year, happy holidays. We made it through 2021, although it still feels on some level like it's 2019. There's a lot going on this month, so I want to make sure to be as succinct and straightforward as possible. I'm going to try and make this a little bit of a shorter video because it just is probably better that way, so I don't get lost in the sauce. Something that's going to happen on December 1st is Neptune's going to turn direct. This is an outer planet, and so its effects are more far-reaching. It's a type of thing where we're not really going to understand or feel it necessarily until time moves on and we start to get a better picture of what exactly the landscape was from a bird's eye view. You know, they say hindsight is 2020. This is going to be true for every cycle that has to do with the outer planets. We're always going to have a better idea of what exactly they meant when we look at it from a past perspective, so when we're looking back on them. The next thing that's going to happen is December 4th. We're going to have a solar eclipse in Sagittarius. This is a big one because this is the final solar eclipse that's happening in Sagittarius. The final eclipse that's happening in Sagittarius and on the Sagittarius-Gemini axis. We've had the past 18 months, so the past year and a half, everything has had to do with this axis. As far as the eclipses go. And so, you know, when I talk to my people in Clubhouse, we talk a lot about the Sagittarius and Gemini axis, at least as far as I'm concerned, having to do with dogma and research. And so the past 18 months have had a lot to do with those two themes, right? Are we being dogmatic in our beliefs? Are we questioning things? Are we embodying things? Or are we just taking things for granted and following all of the ideals that the specific belief system kind of speaks of? That's dogma. That's Sagittarius in the South Node. And the South Node tends to be like a slipstream, like we're moving away from the stuff that's on the South Node and we're moving towards the stuff that's on the North Node. And it doesn't mean anything's good or bad. It just kind of shows you what direction the energy is moving. And for us, it's moving in this Sagittarius to Gemini axis, where again, we're dealing with moving away from dogmatic belief structures in favor of becoming our own researchers, becoming our own research assistants, being the people that are going to really test out the strength of facts, right? Instead of just taking facts at face value because they've come from a reputable institution or because they've come from a reputable scientific branch. This has really been, the past 18 months has been no longer believing or taking things for granted that, you know, we're told essentially, and that's for better or for worse. So there's been moments, of course, where we probably should just take for granted the things that we're given, the things that we're told, and we don't, because we don't trust, right? We're out of trust. We're out of the kind of belief system, belief structure that has held us together, whether it be religion, whether it be some other higher order of knowledge. We're kind of out in the streets, in the scientific streets, testing things out for ourselves and seeing how they stick. So that's been the past 18 months. And this is the very last eclipse across this axis before they now are moving into Taurus and Scorpio. So the North Node will be in Taurus, South Node in Scorpio. And so that's going to be a whole nother kind of talk, and we'll definitely touch on it in the future, but I wanted to just make sure that I really explained where we've come from, since this is our final eclipse across this axis. And so it's kind of exciting, and it's important. In The Eagle and the Lark with Bernadette Brady, this eclipse is supposed to be a joyous one. It's supposed to have to do with happy news, having to do with love and romance, things like that. So there can be the potentiality for it being a good, positive, good feeling energy that's kind of blowing through. But I say this always with eclipses, you have to be aware of what you wish for when they're coming through. There's no intention setting or manifestation or anything like that, just because you may have buyer's remorse, because eclipse energy is very material, and it's very based on the wheel of fortune, if you will, or the wheel of fate. And so things will be given and things will be taken. And so I always say, you know, our suffering is directly in proportion to our attachment to things. And so sometimes we get things that we want and then they get taken away from us, or sometimes we get things that we want and we find out later that we actually didn't really want them, and we should have probably been a little bit more judicious about the way that we went about manifesting things into our lives. So that's the eclipse on the 4th. Again, you know, kind of seed over your intention setting back to the universal forces. Let the universe guide the way. Use the eclipses as an opportunity to notice that the universe actually is carrying us along a stream, that we don't need to do things, that doing things will get done no matter what. And mostly the things that cause us suffering are us thinking that we need to do things when in fact, the things are gonna happen no matter what. We're not in control. And so you can give the eclipse as kind of that. There's a lot of fated events, right? Materially fated events happen because they're kind of like this time where, I like to say, matter, it's like a matter materializing time. So if there's been something that's been brewing, right, on the negative side that you really haven't addressed, that you should have addressed, that you've been lacking paying attention to, right, that you've been shoving under the rug, something might blow up during an eclipse. There may be a physical manifestation of the thing that you have not given kind of space or time for. Even if you have, right, there still can be fated events that happen that change the course of things, because on some level, this is your karma, this is the direction you're supposed to go in. And so there's a couple, it's kind of like buyer beware during eclipse cycles, but it's also just give yourself a few weeks to process whatever thing's happening. Not everyone is a emotional projector like myself, because I also study human design, but let your emotions kind of have time. Don't just follow them blindly. Give yourself a night to sleep on it. Give yourself 2 weeks to sleep on anything that seems like a good idea right now that's out of your normal behavior. So those are all things that I would just say insofar as just following the eclipse cycles and making sure that you're being, again, discerning, judicious, careful, aware, and kind of, like I like to say, seeding your intention setting powers back to the universe. So just as far as being a student goes, you can be a student of this and just see what pops up, right? And depending on what house it's happening in for you is going to depend on where it shows up in your life. If it's hitting any major planetary aspects, it's happening around, I believe, the 4th degree. I believe it's the 4th. It's happening in somewhere between the 4th and the 10th degree of Sagittarius. So just watching that, you know, giving it some space and some time. If there's any planets that fall there, if there's any opposition, so anything in Gemini as well, may be activated during this eclipse. So just paying careful attention to that. I'm like, let me actually just check what degree it's happening on with my American ephemeris. We'll think about that later. Okay, so anyway, December 13th, we have Mars into Sagittarius and Mercury into Capricorn. So for some of us, Mars has been in Scorpio for a while now, and Mars in Scorpio is actually a really good time to get things done, like really get things done, to organize things, to structure things, to get things moving in a way. Let me just. This is a yerba mate Perrier. But yeah, Mars in Scorpio has been a time to like get your list together, get your plans plotted, get everything set up, all the organizational things that you need in place. And basically, we have Mars going into Sagittarius on the 13th, and that's going to be a little bit more of an exciting, dynamic, adventurous kind of energy. And so we just want to be aware of that shift. We may have gotten a lot done during Mars's transit through Scorpio. It's in its home sign. So Mars's assertion, its will, its determination has really been able to be utilized in full force during this time, especially if you have a specific relationship with Scorpio in your chart that would help that. If Scorpio is in your 6th house, Scorpio is in your 1st house, you're going to see Mars really having this ability to like amp up your work. When it moves into Sagittarius again, there's more of a jovial, exciting, adventurous kind of flavor to Mars. So watch that transition as Mars moves from Scorpio to Sagittarius on the 13th. On the very same day, Mercury is going into Capricorn. And so Mercury's been in Sagittarius, kind of paving the way with the sun in Sagittarius as well. And Mercury in Capricorn is very similar to the sun's movement into Capricorn. So it's again kind of moving ahead of the sun's place when it's going to be there on the winter solstice on the 21st. So Mercury in Capricorn is going to be more likely to think in a strategic, organized strategic, organized, and more of a let's say straightforward kind of way, as opposed to mine, Mars and Gemini, Mercury and Aries. It's like fast. Mercury and Capricorn is going to be like, well, we've done this, now let's do that, let's do the other thing. This is how we structure something in order to make it the most efficient and coherent manifestation of itself. So Mercury into Capricorn may be a good time to think about the future, think about the plans, maybe plan for your 2022. But just generally, it is the fastest moving planet besides the moon, which isn't a planet, but it's the fastest moving. So just be aware it's moving into Capricorn. It's been in Sagittarius. See if there's a kind of noticeable shift for you. People who are going to notice it more: Gemini risings, Virgo risings. Most of us may not really notice it that much at all. So yeah, that's something to just pay attention to, because it's happening on the same day as Mars is transit into Sag. The next thing that's happening is on the 18th, we have the full moon in Gemini. So this full moon is not going to be an eclipse. And so we're kind of back to the normal material world that we've all been a part of. So it will be a little bit of a return to normalcy as far as our lunar cycles go. Like I said, they've been in a position where they are in eclipse season. They are matter materializing eclipses where things are happening that may be more intense, maybe more faded. So this is our first real time where we have the eclipses between Sagittarius and Gemini for the past 18 months, where we have the lunar full moon in Sagittarius and Gemini since the past 18 months where it's not an eclipse. So there may be like a expressed feeling of pressure being released from this axis. So if you're a Sag or a Gemini rising, it may feel a little bit less pressureful than our past Sag and Gemini full moons that we've had over the past 18 months, something to look forward to. But also you can kind of move back into whatever you typically do on your full moons. I'm going to be honest, I don't do a whole lot on any lunar phase. I kind of follow it. I pay attention to it. I see what comes up. But yeah, this is the first full moon without any eclipses, any nodes near them for a while. And again, moving forward. So the next thing, December 19th, we have Venus is retrograde in Capricorn. So this is one of the biggest things that's happening this month. I would say the 4 biggest things that are happening this month is the eclipse, the Venus and Capricorn situation with its retrograde, the Jupiter's movement into Pisces, and the final Saturn square Uranus, at least of this year, and the final one that's exact. And so, you know, it's kind of these four things are big. And depending again on your chart, where the degrees are, where things are happening specifically, is going to determine the way that you kind of experience everything. And so for the Venus retrograde in Capricorn, a couple things to note. One, this is happening right around Pluto. On the 11th of, I believe it's the 11th of December, Venus is going to conjoin with Pluto. It's going to go direct, continue past Pluto, and then it's going to retrograde. And so we have this dance between Venus and Pluto, which is like Persephone and Hades. Venus is going into the underworld. And what is Venus? Venus has to do with our desires, our love. It has to do with things that are pleasurable, things that are beautiful. Creativity, you know, there's joy in Venus, Venusian things. There's sensuality in Venusian things, but more than anything, it's really how we're relating with people in a loving way, not least of all ourselves. And so if there's been any places where you're not being loving to yourself, Venus in Capricorn is going to show up with this retrograde and show you basically what's happening. My non-sponsored drink. There's a lot actually that I have to talk about with this, and I'm definitely going to post on it at some point in the near future, because it's a really, really big thing, because Venus is going to be in Capricorn for a long time because of its retrograde, because Venus's retrogrades only happen every 18 months. And because it's happening very close to Pluto, there's just a lot going on with this Venus retrograde. And I think that, you know, just to kind of start and to talk about something somewhere, something that's really like stuck out to me with the Venus retrograde is the idea with Venus in Capricorn of longevity. Ernst Wilhelm hosted making a series about love. I think partially because the eclipses are about love, but it's also speaking to this Venus retrograde and how love has to do with utility and how love has to do with things that are in utility, right? So you can tell how much self-love somebody has with how much the things that they do are have some kind of utility, have some kind of higher purpose for their individual self, right? If I'm eating blueberries, there's a utility to that. There's vitamins in them. You know, there's something else besides just the act of eating it, the act of pleasure. There's a kind of future-oriented goal with Venus in Capricorn. It's looking to the longevity of something before we do it. It's making sure that it is not just good in the moment, but that it's good in the future. It's good. It's a good thing that has been done in the past, right? That it holds some kind of a weight that doesn't just disappear the moment that the thing happens, right? I eat a Jolly Rancher, I eat a piece of chocolate, chocolate's gone. There's a negative kind of net effect on me because of eating that kind of processed sugar, and it's done. So we could say that, like, I like that thing, it's good, it's pleasurable, but it's not self-loving, it's not self-caring, it's not self-reverent. And so this is something that I think is going to be really majorly highlighted during the Venus retrograde in Capricorn with Pluto, is where have we been lying to ourselves about the things that we do to and for ourselves that we're doing in the name of self-care, right? I say this all the time. Self-care is not drinking wine in the bathtub. I mean, maybe sometimes it is, but for the most part, wine isn't very good for you. And so if you're drinking wine in the bathtub, you know, the net effect of that ultimately is probably not a positive thing. And so again, you can see how much self-love someone has for themselves, not in how often they hashtag YOLO, but actually in how they are really feeding themselves for the future, how they are being in service to their own bodies, right? Going to the gym can be a very martial experience. It can be very like a drill sergeant kind of experience. But going to the gym can also be a Venus and Capricorn experience. It can also be an experience where I love my body so much that I'm going to make sure that it is good for the long term. And that's me loving myself, right? It's not me loving myself, isn't me laying in bed. It's not me just taking a load off. Now it's going to look different for everyone, because sometimes people, again, are like drill sergeants for themselves. They are going to 6 hot yoga classes a week, me. They are doing insane kind of sets of things that are really not good for their bodies ultimately. And that's why it's, this whole self-love thing is really an inside job. I'm not going to be the one to tell you that going to the gym is self-loving or is not. You have to check in internally and see how it fits. It is loving if it serves the utility of the self, if it serves the long-term, just the longevity of the self, right? If this thing repeated over and over and over and over and over again will lead to a net positive outcome or a net negative outcome. So anything that, we do is magic, right? Because whatever we do is casting spells, even if we don't notice it in the immediate moment, right? And if you're going to the gym every day, there's a level, and you're doing it out of self-love, there's this level of spell that you're casting that makes you more vibrant, more, just embodied, more in yourself, and more loving of yourself, because you're adding this level of self-reverence to your daily activity. And I know the gym's a really shitty example, because really this has nothing to do with how you look. And I want to just expressly say that this has nothing to do with how you look. This is everything to do with how you feel. And it has nothing to do with any number on the scale. It has nothing to do with anything that has to do with glamour. It has everything to do with you loving yourself. And so the net outcome that comes about from that self-love. And if you don't, you can tell, if you're lying, if you're going to the gym out of a sense of not enoughness, or out of a sense of not being good enough, all of those types of things, then you're going to notice, because your body's going to start breaking down. Your rotator cuff is going to tear. You're going to have injuries, right? So there's a level of really honoring the self. And this Venus retrograde with Pluto involved is really going to check in with those habits that you have that you may think are honoring the self, but aren't. And also with the habits that you have that really are honoring the self. They'll be reinforced, essentially. Now, I know it's all about self-love. And a lot of people want to hear about person-to-person love. And I think that that's another important thing. I think that, to be fair, right, that we've gotten sold a really false bill of goods as far as loving other people, right? Coming from someone who's has a lot of trauma around love, not just from relationships, but from my own childhood. The culture really does a disservice in making us think that we're looking for some kind of soulmate, and that person is supposed to make us feel all kinds of big emotions, right? Because realistically, the person that loves you, it again has to do with utility and longevity. If I love this person, does this person serve me? Do I serve this person, right? Their highest good. If this pattern is repeated over and over and over and over again, do we both grow, or are we cycling down into repeated traumas? What's happening here? What is the pattern that I'm a part of with another human being? If it's not causing you to create, if it's not causing you to grow, if it's not causing you to feel like you're able to open up your heart, that's not love. Sorry, that's some kind of complex trauma, addiction, some kind of dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin trigger that's happening. And, we're just animals, so there's not really anything that is inherently wrong with it. We're going to experience these things. Often we have these kind of intense experiences with other people because we're supposed to look at what is inside of us that we haven't addressed about love and loving, and can we love ourselves? You really can't love somebody else until you love yourself. This statement has been said to me so many times in my childhood and also growing up, and like throughout my entire 20s. I actually never loved myself, and I still am working on it. It's a fucking everyday thing. Excuse my French. It's an everyday thing. And so this is something that we really, really, really have to get clear on, because the culture sells us this thing where it's like, okay, you're going to find somebody, and then, you're going to live happily ever after. And the truth is, if you don't have meaning in your life, and if you don't have purpose in your life, then you're not going to find somebody that mirrors back to you having meaning and purpose in your life. You're going to be with somebody who doesn't love themselves. You're going to run after people who don't want to be there for you. You're going to, create more pain and trauma. You need to revalue or review love and consider it as something that has so much more to do with how you guys help each other grow, what you're able to accomplish together, how you're able to hold a container, hold a space for the other person to work out some of their more complex issues that are not maybe even just from childhood, but from their quantum karma from past lives. I mean, this is not a joke. And we're all just looking for someone that's going to make our system start doing the bells and whistles thing. But in reality, that can happen. But if that's all that's happening, and that person can't be a container for you, and they can't work out their traumas with you, and they can't open up and be vulnerable to you, you're going to end up in a situation where you're repeating patterns from the past. And so this Venus retrograde with Pluto involved is going to basically highlight that fact too. If you're with someone because of something that's essentially only for utility, and not actually because there's a soul tie there, because there's some kind of a real desire to be with the other person, that's also going to be triggered. And everything has to do realistically with your chart, your specific chart. It's not going to be something that you can just it's not just going to be something that is the same thing for everyone. Everything has to do with your level of consciousness, as I always say. It's not something that you're going to be able to pinpoint. Everything has to do with where you're at right now, what you're looking for, who you're with, why you're with them, why you feel the way you feel about yourself, how you feel about yourself, how you show up in your relationships, right? So there's just these kind of themes, these archetypal themes around Pluto, right? Dredging up the underneath stuff, the stuff that is at the bottom of everything, the stuff that is at the bottom of the patterns, why I have intense emotions around certain things. And Venus, our feelings, our emotions, our desire to create harmony with others, why we're doing it. Again, why are we being nice to people? Are we doing it because we think we're supposed to? Or are we doing it because we actually feel strongly about it? So that's my kind of long-winded way of talking about this Venus retrograde. It's going to be Pluto 9, Saturn 9, right? Saturn is hosting Venus in Capricorn, Venus retrograde. So it's going to have to do with the future, the past. It's going to have to do with our love, the way that we build things in love. and if they're built to last or not, and if they're shallow or if they're deep, if they are a shell or if there's actually some kind of meat to them. So then the sun goes into Capricorn on the 21st for our winter solstice. This is actually, it kind of begins the winter, but it also begins the time of the year where we get more light. So, we've been going towards the darkest times of the year since the fall equinox, and at the winter solstice, it's going to be the darkest time of the year, but then the light's going to start returning and we're going to get more light in our days. So that's an exciting thing in general, even though sometimes Capricorn season can feel like a drag. December 24th, we have Saturn square Uranus, which is our final Saturn square Uranus. That's going to be exact, although I will say that it's going to happen very close to exact in 2022. And so, with these larger planets, these outer planets, there's just going to be more, I guess you could say, there's just going to be more again, like Neptune, like we were talking about in the beginning, there's just going to be more of a long-standing feeling. And I've said this before, 2021 is always going to be a Saturn square Uranus year for everyone. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter where you are in this world, Saturn squaring Uranus for all of 2021. 2022 is going to be somewhat similar to that. We're not finished with it, but it is the last time that it's going to be happening exactly. And so kind of the fireworks and things like that are going to reach an apex point on Christmas Eve. So prepare for really crazy delivery stuff happening. I assume that's going to happen when it comes to like presents and stuff like that. And Saturn square Uranus has really just, again, been Saturn in Aquarius, which is like the future thinking way that we go about believing in ideals. How does the reality of our day-to-day measure up to what it should be, right? What we can fathom it being. What is the reality of the world? Like, how does it measure up to our ideals? Saturn in Aquarius. And we're going to feel bad about how much it doesn't measure up. Saturn in Aquarius, and Aquarius in general, has so much to do with ideals and ideas of ideals. So that just means like we live here and now, right? But we think about the future and what we're capable of, even though it's not here yet. And so Saturn never has to do really with the present moment. It has to do with this balance between Capricorn, the past, and Aquarius, the future. And so people who are Aquarian by nature are always looking to the future, are always looking at ideals, are always seeing what's missing right now. And so there's, the Saturn and Aquarius generation is all about what's wrong with the status quo, how are we going to change it? Uranus and Taurus is about what is actually the material stuff that we're dealing with, the food, the actual, the houses, the money, the things that we use every day, cars, trains, automobiles, the grounded stuff that lives on Earth. How are those things not living up or measuring up to our ideals? And how can we change them really fast? And can we? I mean, we really can't, but there's a sense that we're going to try, when it comes to things like crypto, when it comes to things like the way that we eat, the supply chain, all of those things, not measuring up to ideals. Let's change them really fast. Let's see what happens. And so that's been a very Saturn square Uranus theme, and we've seen it all year. So this is just finishing that up, and it will probably end with some kind of spicy fireworks. And then finally, Jupiter entering Pisces. So this is going to be good for me because I'm a Pisces, full disclosure. And Pisces is where Jupiter is at home. And so Jupiter is the planet of abundance, the planet of giving, the planet of growing, the planet of yes, it's an affirming planet. And so Jupiter's been in Saturn sign in Aquarius for the past, well, it's been there for a while. but it's also gone into Pisces briefly in 2021. And so we've gotten a little bit of a taste of it. More than likely, we're going to go back to being around people that we love, seeing them, being able to be around our friends. I think we're probably going to be saying to ourselves, coronavirus, who? Even though they'll, of course, there'll be qualified difficulties with that as well. But Jupiter is going to create more of an ability to kind of be in this Jovian, outgoing, growing, fun-loving, feel-good, watery, loving, all-encompassing sign. And so Jupiter in Pisces is going to be a hugely good feeling for 2022. I'm really looking forward to it for myself. It's in my 5th house. It's with my son. And so it's going to be a great time for me, I think. And so I'm looking forward to how that plays out in general and how I feel about it, but also how the collective reacts to the movement. And when I say reacts, I guess that's not right because the planets aren't causing anything, but I'm excited to see this kind of shift in momentum with Jupiter because Jupiter is the greater benefic. And so it's going to be a really, really nice feeling generally. And then we got the new year. So anyway, it's been a really, really good, I guess, 2021. It's been crazy as far as how much I've grown. I'll probably start making more videos in the new year. There's a lot going on, as is usual, but thank you for whomever watched this. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you next time.